G'day everyone, and welcome to the Perspectium webinar entitled Delivering ServiceNow Value at Accenture. Over the next 60 minutes, you are going to hear about 3 different ways that Accenture uses Perspectium to deliver value to their customers. We'll also be showing you a live demo of Perspectium Replicator, so you can appreciate how much easier it is than many of the alternatives. Just a couple of quick logistical items before we get started. First of all, everyone is muted on the call, so you won't be able to hear your voice, but we do want to hear your questions. And so if you have any questions as we go through the content today, please just type them into the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen, and we're going to try to get to as many of those questions as we can during the session. Also, today's session is being recorded. So if you love it so much that you want to see it again, or you want to show it to one of your colleagues who maybe wasn't able to join us, you will get a link in an email in the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that, and feel free to share it, like I said, with your colleagues. My name is Craig McDonough. I will be your host for the webinar. But before we go any further, I would like to introduce the real stars of the show today. Firstly, we're excited to be joined by Jeff Lowenthal and Jonathan Livingston from Accenture. Jeff is the Service Management Portfolio Lead and Enterprise Architect at Accenture, where he's been an IT professional for 21 years. In that time, he's learned many technologies and managed multiple global implementations for internal and client-facing solutions. Jonathan is currently the lead architect for the ServiceNow application for Accenture Services. He led the global requirements definition across multiple business units and led the development team that built and implemented ServiceNow. Jeff and Jonathan, thank you both for joining us today. I'd also like to introduce Ben Nutton. Ben is one of our solution architects here at Perspectium. Ben has been working with ServiceNow for over 6 years. And in fact, I'm sure many of you may have heard of the work that he did managing the ServiceNow implementation, the development team, when he was at the New York Stock Exchange. He also implemented ServiceNow at multiple financial service clients when he was at KPMG. And Ben is going to be demoing the Perspectium Replicator product later today. So you'll get a chance to see that in action and to hear from Ben at that time. So we're going to get back to Jeff, Jonathan, and Ben in just a moment. But first, I would like to go over the outline for today's webinar. So we're going to start off with a quick introduction to Perspectium, just to get everyone on the same sort of level, to make sure that everyone's got that background. We'll be really quick there, and then we'll get right into the reason why you're all here, which is to hear about those 3 use cases at Accenture. And Jeff and Jonathan will certainly be doing most of the talking during that section. Then, like I said, Ben will do the live demo of Perspectium. And at the very end, we'll have some time for questions. But please feel free to drop your questions into that Q&A panel as we go, and then perhaps we can get some of those questions answered as we're moving through the agenda. So let's get started. Like I said, as a quick level set, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes introducing everyone to Perspectium. So we were founded back in 2013 by David Liu. And for those that don't know, David was the founding developer at ServiceNow. The vision of our company is to deliver a data services platform enabling integrated solutions for ServiceNow and Salesforce, ensuring that information is in the right place at the right time, complete with the data control, high availability, and throughput demanded by modern enterprises. In a relatively short time, the company has grown significantly. We, in fact, grew over 300% last year to where we are today. We're now at 36 enterprise customers, managing well over 50 million data exchanges every day. But what exactly is integration as a service, and how is it different? Well, integration as a service is the modern approach to connecting business applications to one another, and it has these 4 attributes. First of all, control. from within the native application. Control over content, security, and access, meaning that you control what data is sent to other applications, both from a field and a record perspective. Unlike other integration platforms that send out all or nothing, Perspectium gives you control over precisely what data goes in and out and to which applications. Availability is built into the product from the ground up. This is an integration technology that was architected for the cloud, and it's delivered in a highly available model, complete with multi-node clustering and a mirrored message bus. Unlike other products, Perspectium doesn't rely on agents, nor can it be stopped by something as trivial as a power outage. Throughput is another attribute that's very important, and true integration as a service provides an enterprise service bus that allows database loads of 200 records per second per thread, and of course you can run multiple threads. Unlike other integration platforms, Perspectium can copy everything from your production systems while you're using them without slowing anything down. And then finally, openness. Integration as a service enables openness to encourage discoveries and to trend everything, create bespoke data-driven alerts, and bring them all together in one place. And integration as a service, when coupled tightly with ServiceNow technology, delivers those integrated solutions for ServiceNow. And this is what they look like. These are some of the solutions that Perspectium delivers for ServiceNow customers. And you can see that we span across the same product areas as ServiceNow, delivering solutions that can make your existing ServiceNow investment even more valuable by connecting it, to the other enterprise applications that you use within your business. And remember, all of this was created by the founding developer of ServiceNow, David Liu, and so it is, very well embedded within ServiceNow, and it works particularly well there. Now, all of these integrated solutions are so powerful that Accenture uses Perspectium for 3 different use cases, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. And of course, the people who know most about this are Jeff and Jonathan. So hi again to both of you.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for having us.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. Jeff and Jonathan, just before we get into the sort of the technical detail, can you each tell us a little bit about your roles at Accenture and your responsibilities to the business?
Yeah, I'll start off. I've been in the service management space for quite some time. We started on Remedy, and then we're in the process and mostly migrated onto ServiceNow. So we decided to really, put our best foot forward from a managed service perspective to be competitive in the market. So as Craig alluded to, we set up what we call a best practices process within ServiceNow that accommodated the majority of our client base, and then we've just been adding clients in a managed service way to ServiceNow, where they all use a consistent process, and they all have the data and everything's configurable. But we spend our days onboarding new clients, reviewing enhancement requests, and just making sure that our clients are happy. I think it's in a future slide, but we have a lot of clients, so they keep us very busy, and we also we have a cab and stakeholders and all that kind of stuff. So we feel like we've really done an effective job of funneling everything so that it's digestible to us, because people always are looking to automate or improve the service management process. And just to add, we use all of ServiceNow from a service management perspective. So incident, problem, change, release, configuration, service catalog. We use all those modules quite extensively across our client base. Turn it over to you, Jonathan.
So as an architect of the application, my role is more to build and deploy the items that our clients are looking for, and build those solutions out and make sure that they are scalable and repeatable solutions. And Perspectium was something that we found, and it's been really great for us. We've been able to grow at a very rapid pace. As Jeff said, we're onboarding customers basically every week onto our platform. And as a part of that rapid growth, we need to be able to sustain rapid integrations without impacting the performance of the platform. So this was this is a big solution for us to find and leverage. So we're really happy to be working with Perspectium on this.
And we're really happy to be working with Accenture on this. One of I think Jeff, you mentioned earlier on some of the sort of the numbers around your implementation. It's incredible to think that you're replicating around 2 million records every day.
Yeah, it's quite busy. We started with Fuji, so we haven't. We probably don't have the same credentials that some of these people have, or started with Aspen or Berlin, but the growth has been just incredible, and that is where something like Perspectium is so handy. As we talk to our scenarios, you'll see why, because it's sort of hands off when it comes to moving data around, as opposed to all the things that you would have had to do traditionally with the standard replication.
Yeah. Since you talk about the scenarios, why don't we jump into that and just talk about sort of the at a high level the problems that you needed to address.
Yeah, sure. So we all know, ServiceNow has its own reporting capability, but we also have a reporting data warehouse that brings in data from other tools, as well as we're multi-tenant, domain separated, so there's some tables we can't give our clients access to, and then of course at Accenture it's leased access anyways, right? So you only get access to the clients that use data for the clients that you support. So we needed to get the data out of ServiceNow, and it's quite extensive. Our SQL reporting database has some standard reports, but we also allow our clients to do what we call ad hoc reporting using SQL Server reporting services, so they can create any report that they want. So we have to be very dynamic and limber in making sure we have all the data we need from ServiceNow within our reporting data warehouse, and we needed to be there very quickly. Those of us who've been in the industry for a long time, it seems like anytime anyone comes to you with a reporting requirement, they precede it with real-time reporting. Now we know that it's not necessarily real-time per se, but with Perspectium getting things out in sub-second or a couple seconds after every update, that really allowed the messaging to change. Now we still have to do some ETL once it gets in our reporting warehouse, but the idea of getting the data out of ServiceNow into our reporting warehouse somewhat seamlessly. You add a column or a field in ServiceNow, and Perspectium picks it up, and it understands the data types and does all that wonderful stuff. I mean, that really was a marked improvement step, and really helped with the messaging around reporting and near real-time reporting. And I think that's probably a fairly common scenario. That's sort of the just copy everything out. Most things are done through dynamic shares, but we did have to do bulk shares, schedule bulk shares on some stuff because it's just so chatty. So that was kind of a learning curve for us, but just the challenge of getting all this data out, getting it in that reporting database, making it available to our Accenture engagement teams that support our clients was just incredibly important to us, and Perspectium filled that quite well. More unique to us is Accenture, though I suppose most enterprises also integrate to several tools. We just have the added challenge where we're integrating to several other client tools. That's inbound, outbound, and it's it could be a monitoring system, but it also could be another incident management system. It could be any number of things. I mean, it's amazing what we're asked to integrate with. It's quite extensive, email, SharePoint, whatever. So Perspectium plays a very important role in disseminating that information out to those clients. Jonathan will talk in more detail about how we do that, but we did leverage the Replicator SDK to make that work. And then the final scenario, which is really important to us, given that we're constantly onboarding clients, was Perspectium help us streamline and basically automate most of our onboarding process. So we have a third-party capability where we're, online, we're collecting all the configuration data, and then we call the API and push that to our staging, and then our clients do a UAT or system readiness test, and then once they pass that, we can seamlessly, very quickly say, okay, you're ready in production. So if you took out the idea that, it takes a long time for clients to get their data right and collect that data and make sure that things like categorizations and groups, support groups and all that stuff is correct, we really can onboard someone in a couple of days, right? Because we've automated taking, an online spreadsheet type tool, push that into staging, and then we've automated, for the most part, the ability to move that data from staging to production, which is where Perspectium comes in. So really happy with that outcome, because that's always sort of a litmus test. How quickly can we get on board people? Say, well, if you got all your data ready, we can do it in a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. But there's always that runway up front. So you got to be careful how you answer that question. So those are the three key scenarios.
Yeah. And when you first engaged with Perspectium, were all three of those problems that you needed to solve, or did you start with one and then realize that you could use Perspectium to help you with the others?
The reporting, obviously that was right in the wheelhouse. The client tools, yes, it took a little bit of thinking, but we're like, yep. It took a while we had to get the SDK, we had to understand the SDK, and we had to do some development, so that took a little bit longer, but it always was our intent. And then I think the migration, Jonathan can speak to that, but I think that was like, wait a second, this would be great for this, because obviously we have the data in this external tool, so we could have pushed it to staging and then pushed it to production. But this way, you push it to staging, you make all your updates in staging, and then you just push it to production. So it really was a market improvement, because it avoided, somehow syncing that data that's already in ServiceNow back to this provisioning tool. So that was that third example is one that we're like, wait a second, this is a really powerful tool. We can use it for more than we originally intended.
Yeah, it's questions actually come in from one of the attendees in the webinar, wondering whether you've done any sort of financials integration like SAP.
We integrate with SAP all over the place. But there's very different scenarios. I mean, certainly internally, we have something called a work breakdown structure, or we call it WBS element. That process of how you create WBS and get that approved and all that, that's something that we do for Accenture internally. We don't do that for our clients. So I would say the SAP examples are more internal, where we kind of have control of all the systems, but I'm pretty sure we've done some for clients as well, because SAP does everything, right? I mean, we're probably integrating with an SAP incident management capability, right? But the financial stuff tends to be walled off when you get into client implementations.
Right. Just before we do go to Jonathan to sort of dive into a little more detail on these, just want to talk a little bit about the implementation that you went through. And so how long ago did you actually do the implementation of Perspectium?
I think we're going on about 2 years now. So
okay. And so did you? I mean, were you out there sort of looking at other options before you decided on Perspectium, or was it sort of always Perspectium from day one?
I'll take that one. We knew the first two requirements were going to be out there, and so there was a decision on whether to build or buy. We knew we needed something, and we wanted a cloud-based architecture and get into a modern architecture where we had a queue and something along the lines of exactly what Perspectium offers. And in digging through the store, the ServiceNow store, and looking around on the web, just looking for people who had done things like this, we came across Perspectium, and the drawings almost exactly matched what we had initiated, what we initially thought we were going to need to build, and it was it was a very, very close fit for purpose tool. It was exactly what we, if we were going to build it, this is exactly what we would have built, and to have someone already have built it and have the expertise already in the tool out there. It was a big find for us, and so we had to convince our leadership that we needed to buy. Once they saw the power, it was a pretty easy job for me to convince Jeff that we needed to buy it.
And it's actually quite shocking. It's quite shocking for two of your top developers come to you and say, we don't want to build this, we want to buy it. It's usually the other way around, right? So
right.
It's quite an interesting use case. And we briefly looked at some of the competitors out there, but quite frankly, nothing even came close to fitting as neatly into what we needed as Perspectium.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And now, so when you implemented Perspectium, I understand you did that sort of from day one. Like as you were building your ServiceNow tool, you built the Perspectium integration piece at the same time. Talk us through how that sort of happened.
Well, I said when we were looking to stand up our ServiceNow offering, we knew we needed reporting and client integration. We knew that those two things were out there, and for before we went live with any clients, we knew we had to have an integration facility, because almost every one of our clients has some level of integration to a system that they own and they run. And many, if not all, do some level of reporting externally. In fact, being able to build into our existing reporting capability, we just wanted to be able to fold that data in. So we knew we needed these things before we even got started with offering this as a solution. So we were doing several things at once, which was defining the overall solution with our Accenture stakeholder, our lines of business stakeholders, and developing the platform. And at the same time, we were developing how are we going to get this data out to our clients via reporting and via integration. So it was always known that we needed this from day one, and we wouldn't have gone live without those two things in place. And so it was something that was absolutely required for us to roll out the solution and start offering it to our customers. So it was always going to be something that was there, and it was a great fit.
Oh, good. And then, so talk us through the implementation itself. And what did you need? Any sort of specialized resources to get this up and running? Like how did the implementation sort of flow for you?
The implementation was actually very straightforward. We work with your teams to install the software. It comes as an update set. I'm sure everyone who's familiar with ServiceNow knows about update set. So it comes as an update set. You install it. You don't really have to do a lot of configuration. And we immediately got running, got an agent installed on a SQL server. And then it took some time to get the SDK up and running, because that was a larger development effort. So the gray arrow there in the client tools, that was some development effort. But when we had the SDK, I think we were getting messages off of the queue within just a couple of business days after we had the SDK in hand. So the development effort was not difficult from our side. The connection point and getting something up and running was relatively straightforward. And so it was not a difficult process. The reporting side is really very straightforward for us. We continue to work with other reporting solutions out there. So we do data extractions to other reporting systems. So it's not just one SQL server that we send this to. There are a handful out there that we send data to. And turning these up is a relatively straightforward process. It's not something we do every day, but a couple of times a year we're standing up a new agent and connecting it, and it's something that we've transitioned to our operations team. The development and architecture teams are just there to review, make sure that the use case is accurate, but the actual implementation is off to our ops team to handle, because it's very straightforward to do. It's not that difficult. It's really a question of what do you want to send, and under what conditions do you want to send. And those are, if you know how to use the condition builder in ServiceNow, you know how to filter the data for what the client needs. So it's really straightforward to use.
It's great, yeah. And we'll actually Ben will do a demo in a little bit, and he'll sort of demonstrate exactly how easy it is to use. But it is, like you say, if you can use the condition builder, you're pretty much there. All right, so Jonathan, while you're since we've got you, can you talk us in a little bit more detail through the use cases and that we spoke about? Maybe starting off with this one.
Yeah, sure. So this is the drawing we originally built out when we were evaluating Perspectium. And so ServiceNow, you install the replicator application. It has a series of business rules that run on the table that you want to either dynamically or bulk share, which we'll cover later. Get that data out of ServiceNow and into the Perspectium cloud. There's an opportunity there to duplicate messages. So if you need to send it from to multiple targets, but you only need to send it out of ServiceNow once and send it to multiple places, Perspectium can do that for you, and they can send it to a number of locations. That's a technique we take advantage of quite a bit. So we can send the record out once and send it, and it can land in multiple places on the far side. And the work is done in the cloud, and none of our resources are impacted to do that duplicating of messages. That's left to Perspectium to manage. And the entire path, it's encrypted the entire time we have it. We have a key on the ServiceNow instance and a key on our side, so the message is encrypted the entire time Perspectium has it. They don't see the contents of it at all, and you can actually watch the decryption happen in your applications if you're so interested. But in this case, what we're doing here is sending the data out of ServiceNow into the Perspectium cloud. There's an agent on the far side that is reading and then turning around and storing that data in a SQL server. So not real time, but I'd like to say near real time. Within a few seconds of a record being created in ServiceNow, it's generally on the SQL server. If you have to log into SQL before you can open your SQL client and log in after you've created your record and issue a query looking for that number, it's usually there. But by the time you can do that, it's within 30 seconds that record is typically on the SQL box ready to go. Another advantage that we have is we're not constantly, but we're as we evolve the solution, we're changing or changing, like the incident form. We're adding fields, adding values. That all just dynamically happens on SQL on the fly. The agent just does an alt table, adds a column, and starts populating it with data. To not have to manage that in any way, coming from other systems, that was something that was always a concern. Was, are we adding columns? How do we manage that on the reporting side to make sure we have the column to make sure we're storing the data? And in other platforms, we've had to coordinate that change, and that can be problematic at times. Here, it automatically happens, and we don't have to bother with making sure that the column is there. We do have to do it in our reporting scheme, but that's something that we can plan for and schedule for. It's not anything that we have to coordinate in a release window.
Right.
That's something that's really advantageous for us as columns get added and updated. That just happens on the back end, and there's not much that we have to, not much thought we have to give into that. That data just is just there.
Yeah.
For our client integrations, we have about 200 to our various number of clients that we've got. The SDK is what we're using to pull off of that message. And what we do right now is we send all messages or send all records for like an incident table. We send it all to our outbound system. The outbound system is then able to just receive those messages, format them as the way the client wants, and then turn around and send that off to the various client systems that are out there. And we do this at scale, 2 million messages a day, as you said, and this is growing rapidly. It's a big thing for us. We as an MSP, integration is almost always involved in one of our deals. So it's something that's got to scale and has to be highly available and performing quickly with little overhead and little maintenance. And that's what we've seen with the Perspectium application. Is we've been able to grow this and scale it and not had any concerns about the overhead it takes to run this. So it's been something that we've really learned to come to depend on, and you guys have come through every time for us. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
This is our primary use case. These are the two things we do the most of.
Yeah, a question actually has just come in, and maybe inspired by this diagram from another one of the attendees, asking whether Perspectium offers a cloud-only reporting structure or whether we need on-premise infrastructure in order to use Perspectium. And I can actually answer that one for you. No, Perspectium is cloud only. You certainly don't need on-premise infrastructure to run to use Perspectium. The purpose of Perspectium in this situation is really just it's replicating data from one cloud system, in this case to a SQL Server. But a SQL Server database, but it could certainly very easily go to another client system, which may be cloud-based, or even another ServiceNow instance as well. And again, we'll show you some more of that as we move through. Another question that's come in, sort of tied back to this use case from an attendee, is does all of the data flow out of your ServiceNow instance only, or do you also update your ServiceNow instance from your clients?
We do receive data from our clients, but that comes in via a different method at this time. So the Perspectium use case is outbound only. We do not come in via Perspectium at this point in time.
All right. Okay. Just to sort of complete that thought, you absolutely could use Perspectium to manage that inbound, but that's just not something you're doing right now.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okie doke. Let's take a quick look at the other use case that you encountered during onboarding.
Sure. So as Jeff said earlier, we have an external provisioning tool that we use, that our clients use to capture data. I think everyone is familiar with the provisioning process. You have to capture spreadsheets, users, groups, group memberships, details about the particular users, and then a level of foundation data. So CIs, SLAs, things like that are captured in this provisioning tool that we have. And then we have automation in place that then turns around and creates that data in ServiceNow. Then we allow our clients into our test environment and allow them an opportunity to view what was provisioned based off what they loaded into the tool. So the clients are in the test environment evaluating what was provisioned, and then once they say they're ready to go, we then provision that via automation. We use Perspectium to share that data between test and production. There are a number of advantages of doing this. If you're familiar with ServiceNow, you know that the sysid of a record is a key bit of information. Having that available and being consistent between two instances is very crucial. That allows us to, and that's what this does for us. When we create a user in the test environment, we then replicate that user to production, and it maintains the sysid between test and prod. So what that allows us to do is we also create all the other relationships for that user, their group membership records, the groups that are out there, as well as foundational data that's out there. All that moves from test to production in a seamless manner. So groups that we use in things like workflow, user membership records, that those all move over, and we can count those being the same between all of our environments. We do this for test as well. We just do it at a small level. We tend to just do groups from test into our development, and then we use those groups to build workflow. So if you need to do an assignment or an approval, and you're doing a group-based approval, you can just pick that group, and then you can move that workflow from test to production, from dev to test to prod, and the group is the same across all the environments. The sysids match, and it's much easier to manage, and we can count on those sysids matching, and it makes things much easier for our users, and for the system growth. Querying by sysid is the fastest way to do it, so we want to make sure that we're doing that at scale, so that as we scale, we're not using name-based queries and hoping that no one changes the name, because we do allow our clients to manage some of this data on their own once they're live and in production. But during the provision process, we own the data.
Right.
Another problem is we have, or another issue that we've solved is the B series there. we have a number of Accenture fleet users that we have, 300-something thousand employees, and they're coming online to work for engagements, and we don't know who needs to be provisioned and when. We just know that we need all Accenture people to be there, and we need to be able to manage their relationships to these engagements as well, because Accenture is a fast-paced business. A client can come on board and need to be online in a week, and we need to have the team ready to go. They're getting the team ready in real time. They're bringing in new hires to work on these projects. So the user base for Accenture is a constant thing, and we have most people do LDAP, but we're too large for LDAP, and Accenture has a established business process for how you get at users, and that's via a SQL replication feed. So we have a database server that we receive the user creates and updates, and we do that directly in production. But we use ServiceNow to take those users as they're created and updated and push that data dynamically down into test. So if a new hire comes in that day, we're creating their user record in production. We're pushing that down into test. We're keeping the sysID the same in test, so that as we add that user to groups and functions for that particular engagement, when we then provision that data back into production, the sysID matches. They pick up all the same things that we provision for that particular client, and they're able to just do their work. It's been a huge, that type of work, that type of, I don't have access to my company, I don't have access to the things I need access to in our tool set. In other tools was a difficult thing to manage, and something we had an entire team of people pretty much constantly working on managing access to engagement data. And this has just taken that away for us. We don't have to deal with this nearly as much there. As always, there's a few exceptions, but on the whole, the team just doesn't focus on this at all. It just works, and Perspectium is there in the background, just keeping all this working for us. So this process, we did not have the envision for this, but once we started doing some provisions, we realized the benefit here, and this has become one of our key use cases for Perspectium, and we have guys in there every day moving these provisions in, and Perspectium is something we really rely on for this process.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, I know that onboarding is obviously one of the most critical processes that any service provider goes through. So to be able to have that level of confidence in it is fantastic. So Jeff and Jonathan, what's next for Accenture? Where are you going from here with Perspectium?
So other than just the natural growth, some of the things we're looking at is more advanced business analytics work. So we'll more than likely be sending our ServiceNow data to more modern, as people like to say, analytics capability. So we expect to do that soon. And then we are going to look at inbound, as was mentioned, because it's serviced so well outbound, why not inbound? And then finally, we're working directly with the developers at Perspectium to see how we can potentially when the data goes outbound. Right now, it's the criteria is just basically based on a table, but when we want to send a transaction to a client, it has to include the reference data as well, right? So the primary table, like the instant table, has reference data to email address or whatever it is. We would like to leverage Perspectium to help package that into one nice little package, and then send that as our integrated transaction to that foreign system, as opposed to now where we match the criteria on the instant table, but then we got to go back and get all that reference data after the fact.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that sounds certainly like you've got some work cut out for you over the next little while. We look forward to helping you with that. Jeff and Jonathan, thank you very much for giving us an overview of what you're doing at Accenture. I think that the story that you have to tell is probably one that resonates with a lot of people on the webinar. Just in terms of some of those integrations and some of those use cases that you've managed to automate using Perspectium. So we've appreciated the opportunity to work with you, and look forward to continuing to do so. But
yeah,
what
thanks,
I
Craig.
would
Just to be clear, right? We're internal IT. We're not sales guys. So, if people did hear something that's interesting or compelling to them, feel free to reach out to us, and we may be able to share more with you. But we're not the sales people at Accenture, so just FYI.
Yeah, no problem at all. But yeah, we'll certainly. Like I said, be reaching out to everyone who's on this webinar anyway. So if anyone does want any additional information, just reach out, and we can get you in touch with the right people. What I'd like to do now, though, is quickly change pace and switch over to Ben and let him give us a quick demo of the product, how it all works, what it looks like, and all that sort of thing. Ben, thank you for joining us as well.
All right, thank you, Craig. So this is just a quick reminder of the Perspectium architecture. So again, as opposed to doing point-to-point integrations between different systems, you can now basically use a message broker service to broker the conversation and the data movement from one system to another. So I'm going to show a couple use cases briefly today, and they are between two ServiceNow instances. So it could be a prod and a dev, or your instance and a vendor's instance that also happens to run ServiceNow. And also I will show an integration between a ServiceNow instance and a data warehouse instance. In my case, it's MySQL. But most of the logos you see on there can be tied together as pairs. And you can see how in a complex integration ecosystem, not having to do all just point-to-point, but only connecting your tool to the message broker service individually really reduces the number of pairs of things that you have to worry about and start building from scratch. So the use case I'm going to show is just syncing two instances of ServiceNow. So we've talked about this a little bit. One of the benefits of that is maintaining sysids between instances. So if you have discovery running against production, for example, and you want to make sure that your dev instance gets the same CIs with the same sysids, the manual way of doing that is to export XML and doing a bunch of steps that are cumbersome to do. With Perspectium, it's really just a couple configurations on both sides, and you're basically done. So here I've got an instance of ServiceNow running Fuji, and I have another instance running Geneva. We're pretty version agnostic after, I believe, Dublin and anything onward. And these two instances have a list of Windows servers, and it's the demo data. So it's 8 servers on each side. I'm going to create a server on my Fuji instance, which will stand in as my production instance. And I'm going to give it an asset tag, and I'm going to save the record. Now, the way I've set this up is via the Perspectium application. Like we mentioned, it's an update set, so it shows on the left-hand side of your screen in a navigation panel, and it is managed the exact same way you manage anything else in ServiceNow. And what that means is that you don't have to learn a new tool, your admins don't have to learn a new paradigm, a new scripting language to work with our product. And what I've set up in this case is what we call a dynamic share. So a dynamic share shares one record at a time, as it is being created, updated, or deleted in your environment. And so here I've set up a dynamic share for the Windows Server table, and any table is available here, including database views, including the audit log, anything is available there, including, therefore, tables that the reporting UI in ServiceNow does not give you access to. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm saying whenever there's a create, update, or delete on the Windows Server table, and no filter conditions are matched, then I want to send that record to the message broker service. These filter conditions go to this idea of control that we talked about a little bit earlier. You may have a situation where you only want to sync your CIs are installed in production, for example, between your prod instance and your dev instance. This allows you to filter the data that goes out. So you control at the source what you send to the message broker service and what subscribers at the very most will have access to. Whereas in the web service integration, you give them an endpoint and you kind of trust that they're going to query the right data, or you build security rules which are cumbersome to work with. So this configuration created a business role in my incident table. And whenever I created my Windows server, it automatically noticed that the conditions to share this record were met, and therefore it is sharing the record. So we put the record into an outbound table, and then we're going to send this record is sent almost immediately out to the message broker service. And if we look at the record itself, we'll see a couple things are in the clear, including the table that this is on, but the main payload of the record is encrypted. So this is what we see at Perspectium. We don't actually have access to your data, nor can we mine it or report on it. We can just report on the volumes of data that are going through. You can decrypt the data from your end because you have the encryption key and the decryption key in properties in your Perspectium application. And you can see we're just sending an XML serialized version of that record. Now, on the other side, I've done what we call the subscribe. And a subscribe is very much similar to a sharing, a dynamic share. And it's basically saying whenever you see a Windows Server record coming down the pipe, and there's a create, update, or delete on that record, then put it automatically into the Windows Server table. And so it's really just a like sync. Now you have the ability to add a filter here as well. So your instance that's sharing data may have sent all the CIs, but you only want to subscribe to CIs where the status is installed in production. You have the ability to do that here because your instance can actually decrypt the data. So now if I go into my list of Windows servers, I'll see my new server in here. And this record will have the exact same sysid as the record in the other instance. So adding new tables to this paradigm is effortless and really, really powerful. I've showed the Windows Server table. Any extended tables are always automatically included in those sharing and subscribing. And so you can have a sharing of the main CI table, for example, and all your classes for CIs will automatically be shared. Now, this is a like situation where I've got the Windows Server table and that's on one side and the exact same table on the other side. So there's not a whole lot of complexity. You can use the same setup to do what we call e-bonding between instances. So I have an example here where I've got a incident being created on this side, and I'm assigning it to a group called Networking Company. Networking Company is our outsourced vendor that manages our network. And I've set up a dynamic share the same way as before, except in this case, I added a filter to say only send it to that subscriber whenever the assignment group is Networking Company. On this side, I've subscribed to this record, but instead of putting it into the incident table, this company, Networking Company, likes to manage this as tickets. And so instead, we subscribe to the data, but put it into an import set table, for those of you who are familiar with those concepts in ServiceNow, and then transform the data into a ticket. And so as a result, I have a ticket on one side, and I've got an incident on the other. Now, what's really powerful with this is that you can also sync work notes back and forth and attachments back and forth. So you can say, we are looking into this on this side, and you can also add an attachment on this side. So it could be, a screenshot of the error or a script to run for them to debug something on their end, et cetera, et cetera. And same thing, I've set up a dynamic share from this instance out to the message broker service, and then I've set up a subscribe on this side to the data that comes in from the message broker service. So as I refresh, I will see the work note coming in from the other side. And attachments take a few seconds longer because they need to get broken out by ServiceNow. And I see the attachment at the top. So this allows you to really have both users work in their own system with what they're familiar with. Now, this e-bonding principle works with other applications as well. So it works when we e-bond ServiceNow with Salesforce, for example, or ServiceNow with Jira, right? So you could have an incident created on the ServiceNow side, automatically synced to Jira, and your developers can just work in Jira, add work notes and attachments in Jira, and everything flows back to ServiceNow. So it keeps all the teams in their tool of choice without having to force them into kind of an enterprise solution. So this is ServiceNow to ServiceNow. Like I said, we also leverage this very often at clients, including Accenture, to get data from ServiceNow into a reporting database. So what I've done here is I've created a Tableau dashboard. And my Tableau dashboard shows me all of my active incidents in the United States. And you can see right now there's no incident in Minnesota. I'm going to create a new incident, and we're going to see it appear in Minnesota. So I'm going to create an incident here. And I'm going to pick Bloomington as my location. And I'm also going to add an assignment group. And we'll save the record. Now, when we send the data out to the message broker service, we can actually enrich the data and send more than just this incident record. And I think Jonathan mentioned this earlier, or Jeff, we can send related data or referenced data on this record at the same time. So when I've set up my dynamic share for this particular scenario, what I've told the, what I've put into the configuration is that I also want to share out my incident, my location data and my user group data. So if I go into this particular configuration, and this is all again done via the GUI, it's not, you know, some crazy scripting that you have to come up with. And here what I'm saying is I want to send the location and the assignment group along with the incident. So if we go quickly into the outbound queue, we'll notice 3 records here. We'll notice the incident itself, but we also have the location that was linked to that incident, and we also have the user group that was linked to that incident. So all 3 records go out to the message broker service and sit in the queue in the message broker service. Now, when I go into my Tableau dashboard and I refresh the data, my location table is what holds the latitude and longitude. So I need to join that location table with the incident table to make sure I can show the incidents in the United States by location. And once the screen refreshes, you can see the incident in Bloomington. Now you can see this is basically near real time, right? The data gets sent out of ServiceNow via business rules, so it's basically instantaneous. And then the data gets subscribed to by an agent that's sitting in your data center, in most cases. And that agent then decrypts the data, figures out if there's any schema changes, and then puts the data into the database table. Now, these are all dynamic shares. You also have the ability to share more than just one record at a time, and you can share a bunch of records. Now, if I go into my database view itself, I can see I have a user group table in here, but it only has 2 records in there, and it's because it's user groups that were assigned to incidents that I've shared via dynamic share. I may also have a scenario where I want to share all the groups at once because I need that foundation data for some report. And so to do that, you do just a bulk share in the application. And in here, I'm going to create a new bulk share. I'm going to say user group. The name doesn't really matter. And then for the table, I'm going to select the user group table. The only other thing I need to do here is set up the queue that this is going to. And the queue is really representative of the subscriber to that data. And so this queue PSP agent is my database agent that will, I believe, every 30 seconds, go out to the message broker service via an HTTPS GET, and then get the data back into the database. And all I have to do now is just click execute now. So now this is a job that's going to run against your instance. And if I go back again to my outbound table, we're going to see in a minute that all the records on the sysuser group table are being picked up. Now, I didn't put any filter on this table, but same thing, you could use a condition builder to build any kind of complexity as to what you want to send out in your bulk share. And the bulk share could be consumed by another ServiceNow instance, right? It doesn't really matter because we're just sending the data. However it's going to be consumed is not really relevant. And so here we see a bunch of records. There's actually 107 records in my user group table. So we can see them here, and then, or 108, and then the state is now marked as sent, meaning the instance sent the data successfully to the message broker service. And now as I refresh on this side, I see all my records have come in, and the database agent has managed all of this. So that's kind of a quick overview. We have more information, technical information in pre-recorded videos as well, but we probably have time for a few questions now.
Yeah, actually, I don't know that we do have time for any questions right now, but Ben, thank you for that demo. I think that was the fastest I think I've ever seen Perspectium demo. So
I tried.
No, that was very good. Thank you. Yeah, hopefully that did give everyone sort of a good feel for how easy it is to configure Perspectium and how, you know, Jeff and Jonathan at Accenture were able to sort of get up and running so quickly. You know, with that though, I think we are going to actually need to bring the webinar to a close. I'd like to first of all thank Jeff, Jonathan, and Ben for sharing. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and your experience. It's been great to have you as part of the webinar today.